A little Brandon Beane after dark. No bedtime at One Bills Drive as GM Brandon Beane is hard at work as the free agency period begins and the Buffalo Bills add to a position we have been patiently waiting for them to add at. Who was it going to be? Was it going to be one of the bigger names on the market? It wound up being that name. Was it the name we all wanted? Perhaps not. But a name nonetheless, an edge rusher nonetheless, and perhaps one of the better ones in the last decade or so. May not have gotten the best out of him the last several seasons, did the LA Chargers, due to injury going into his 10th season. But when you consider everything at stake, everything surrounding the situation, it makes a lot of sense. What am I talking about? Of course, I'm talking about Joey Bosa becoming a Buffalo Bill on Tuesday, March 11th, right before we turn over a new leaf to March 12th. At around 10-ish p.m. this evening, Joey Bosa joins the Buffalo Bills on a one-year deal. And with that said, what is up, Buffalo Fanatics? Z-Bot here with you, live on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel on a Tuesday night with breaking news. And it's so good to have you in. Rico gets you warmed up. I'll continue to keep the seat warm until we cool down after about 45 minutes or so to set the stage. We'll talk strictly Joey Bosa tonight. I'll be live with you early tomorrow. Going to get up bright and early, so whether you're at work or you're just getting up, I'll be joining you right here on the Buffalo Fanatics YouTube channel to talk about everything else that the Bills of Brandon Beane have done up until this point. But right now, we will discuss the latest, perhaps the greatest, the biggest addition the Bills have made thus far this offseason. Joey Bosa, the former LA Charger, the defensive end, who has spent his entire career with the Chargers, has now become a Buffalo Bill. This news breaking about an hour and a half ago via Adam Schefter and all of the main NFL mouthpieces. According to Schefter, the five-time Pro Bowler in defensive end Joey Bosa has reached an agreement with the Bills on a one-year, $12.6 million deal. A lot to dive into. Before we dive into it, let's take a look at your chats. Let's see what you guys are all thinking. How are you feeling? Did you see this coming? Did you see it coming tonight? Did you think the Bills would wait just a little bit longer? Maybe explore the Trey Hendrickson situation. Maybe see what else was out there for trading. Maybe go into the draft exclusively. Try to find the solution there. No need to worry or wait any longer. The Bills have inked the deal with Joey Bosa, and he will become the successor to Von Miller, who the Buffalo Bills, of course, released just yesterday. Von Miller no longer a Buffalo Bill. There's still some slight potential for the Bills to bring him back later on in the offseason. We'll see if that ends up happening. But at first glance, at first reaction, this feels like this is the move to to succeed the move of moving off of Von Miller. Von Miller was set to be, I believe, the second biggest cap hit for the Buffalo Bills outside of Josh Allen, who we'll talk about in tomorrow's show. Like I mentioned, we're just going to focus on Joey Bosa this evening. We have a ton to talk about. I want to dedicate a couple of hours to what's going on with Buffalo tomorrow. I want to talk about, of course, the signing of Palmer. I want to talk about bringing in Josh Allen on the highest paid NFL contract, guaranteed money at least, we've seen at the quarterback position. We're going to dive into that. Retaining Johnson at running back, Reggie Gilliam at fullback. We have a ton to talk about. Tonight, though, exclusively, we are going to be talking about Joey Bosa. So if you were wondering where I was, it's funny. Remember how I told you a couple of shows ago, usually when a big name signing happens for the Bills, I'm out to lunch. I'm usually just doing something, I guess is the better way to put it. I'm never in position where I'm just sitting there and I'm able to immediately hop on. I host a ton of shows over on the Roundtable Sports Network. So Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday nights, I host a show over there. I host the AFC North Roundtable. I host the NFC West roundtable, and I host the NFC East roundtable. And we were about 10 minutes in to the broadcast for the NFC West roundtable when this news broke. Now, it was somewhat interesting to the fan base over on the NFC West network, because apparently the San Francisco 49ers were in the running for Joey Bosa as well. Diana Rossini reported that it basically came down to Buffalo, the Niners, and I believe the Miami Dolphins. So an extra little silver lining in this signing is the Bills take him from a division foe. But this makes a lot of sense for a variety of different reasons. And naturally, like any signing, it seems like the Bills undertake, there is plenty of people who love it, plenty of people who hate it, plenty of people who are in between on it. Let's talk about the reason we're in this situation to begin with. Let's talk about how we get here in the first place, right? If there was one thing you asked any hardcore Buffalo Bill fan, if there was one thing you asked them going into the offseason, what's top priority number one for you? Whether it's free agency, whether it's in, some sort of trade, whether it's in the draft, what's top priority? 99% of the answers would be pass rush, edge presence, upgrading the defensive line to some degree, upgrading the Bills' ability to get after the quarterback. That would be the top response. And I think the second response would be probably upgrading at the wide receiver position to some degree too. Ironically enough, within a 24-hour time span, the Bills do that. And ironically enough, the acquisitions come from the exact same team. Interesting. Also in the AFC, nonetheless. Joey Bosa, the most recent signing for the Buffalo Bills. And let's talk about how we get here, right? Because we had been so infatuated with Myles Garrett. We were so infatuated with the idea of Myles Garrett becoming a Buffalo Bill that it was almost starting to become reality in our head. And even though we knew it was going to be a tall order, even though we knew it might not even be a possibility, it had become such a want. It had become such a desire for us Bills fans that it was really hard to consider that at the very minimum, the Bills weren't going to be in on it. I don't know how you guys feel, but when it flashed across my screen yesterday that Myles Garrett was not only being dealt, but being retained by the Cleveland Browns, I was stunned. If you were with me and Rico just on Friday evening, we were talking about this whole idea of having to play the waiting game with Myles Garrett. That's what we thought it was going to come down to. We thought it was going to be the waiting game. I personally didn't think that playing that waiting game would result in nothing at the end of the tunnel. I thought that we were going to have to walk across the long bridge, but inevitably, once you got over that bridge, there was going to be something on the other side. I thought it was more likely than not that Myles Garrett was going to be moved to a different team than it was him staying in Cleveland. But if you've learned one thing, money talks. Money talks. Myles Garrett, a little over a month or so ago, he pretty much said without saying, I do not want to be in Cleveland. I don't want to play for the Cleveland Browns. Myles Garrett pretty much flat out said that there is no way that I am winning a championship in Cleveland. There is no way that this team is going to put me in position to win a championship that I can look back on throughout my illustrious career and have it be defined as not only just being a great player, but a championship player as well. He pretty much told you, I don't even know if you could say without telling you, he pretty much did say, I am not going to win a championship here. I want to win a championship. And for those reasons, I request a trade from Cleveland. Then all but a few days ago, last week, he said there really is no common ground to reach here. There is not going to be this pie in the sky contract that falls down from the sky, lands in my lap, that's going to convince me otherwise. And sure as hell, that's exactly what wound up happening. I was convinced the way Myles Garrett came out and pretty much told the world, me plus Cleveland equals Dunzo. Not going to happen. Did you not think the same thing? Maybe it wasn't going to be the Bills. I mean, in all likelihood, it probably wouldn't have been, right? The way that these things go. There would have been 31 other teams putting a bid in on Myles Garrett, one of the best defensive players of our generation. The odds of the Bills landing him, were probably this, but at least they were this. And man, were we clinging our hopes to this, right? The idea of him maintaining or retaining, being retained by Cleveland is wild to me, because it just genuinely felt like the money did not matter. But boy, oh boy, did it ever matter. And you can understand why. When somebody throws $40 million a year in your face, it's tough to say, you know what? Maybe I'll pass. I don't know why Cleveland did that, and I don't blame Myles Garrett for signing up for it. And the reason we bring Myles Garrett up first and foremost is because this is how we get to signing Joey Bosa. Don't you find it a little ironic that as soon as Myles Garrett is off the market, almost immediately Joey Bosa becomes a Buffalo Bill? Don't you find it quite ironic that as soon as Myles Garrett becomes a $40 million a year edge rusher, that the Bills look in the mirror and say, yep, one, he's gone, not a possibility. And two, we're not going to be able to come close to that, even if it were a possibility. The other realization you make here, too, is, maybe you switch your mindset to thinking about Trey Hendrickson. We talked about him ad nauseum, right, on Friday. And I had said, Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, one of those two guys needs to be a Buffalo Bill by the end of the offseason. I always knew that the idea of Myles Garrett would be tougher than not, just because it seemed like ownership was digging its heels in. There was no leverage really on either side. It felt like Myles Garrett could kick and scream all he wanted to, but at the end of the day, if the Browns wanted to go into the upcoming season and let him sit on the sideline and not get paid and hold out, it was their prerogative. They could have done it, and Myles Garrett could have signed up for that, really. What we did know is that Trey Hendrickson was granted the ability to seek a trade by the Cincinnati Bengals. We were under the impression that at the very minimum, Trey Hendrickson was on the table. The illusion was that Myles Garrett was on the table. The reality is he never was. Myles Garrett wasn't even being prepped in the back of the kitchen. What was being prepped up is one of the craziest financial deals made for a non-quarterback player we've seen. I mean, think about this. The money going into these guys now. This is where, before you even confirm your take on signing Joey Bosa, and this is why I bring this up first and foremost, before we even talk about adding Joey Bosa, before you even form your take on whether or not you like the idea of bringing him in, we were discussing the idea of bringing in Myles Garrett and then having to pay him. And when we were discussing that, we were also talking about how the Bills might be able to do it financially. And I had been on the record saying, I don't really care how much it costs. Find a way to do it for now. Worry about it later. That's the type of player Myles Garrett is. Take on a financial responsibility currently that you probably won't be able to swallow. But when it's all said and done, you got Myles Garrett for the prime of his career. And you can look back as Brandon Beane, as Josh Allen, as Sean McDermott, as a Bills fan, and say, man, what more could you have asked for in terms of trying to capitalize on the prime of Josh Allen's career and really on the prime of this franchise as it currently stands right now? Then you see the contract that Myles Garrett gets. And it becomes awfully apparent that that was never, ever going to be a possibility. Let's just talk simply about the money being delved out to Myles Garrett. Let me give you some comparisons here. We're talking an average of $40.3 million a year now for Myles Garrett. $40.3 million a year. Matt Stafford, $40 million a year. Before Josh Allen's restructure, which we'll talk about tomorrow, $43 million a year. Currently, Patrick Mahomes, $45 million a year. Kirk Cousins, $45 million a year. Kyler Murray, $46 million. Jalen Hurts, $51 million. You know, some of these other quarterbacks, just to throw it out there, right? Baker Mayfield, $33 million. Baker Mayfield had a great year last year, right? We are talking about fringe top 10 quarterback money at the defensive end position. A 29-year-old defensive end heading into the later stages of his prime. $40 million a year. Even if the Bills were able to put together a package that was too enticing for Cleveland to pass up, that would have been what was waiting for him on the other side. $40 million a year. Of course, this is fresh off the contract that Max Crosby just signed a couple of days ago. You knew you were going to have to at least come close to that, if not beat it, in order to keep him. And Cleveland, they seem to be backed into a corner of either we move him or we give him money that he cannot possibly say no to. This is why I'm sitting here, and the idea of the Bills not finding a way to at least get close to landing Myles Garrett, I can't be upset by it. Can anybody be upset by it? If you're a Cleveland Browns fan today, I mean, granted, you're excited that you're keeping Myles Garrett around. Obviously, you could argue he's the best defensive player in the game. You could argue he's been like that for some time now. But the Cleveland Browns are nowhere close to being competitive anytime soon. Nowhere close. The idea of paying Myles Garrett quarterback money when you yourself are already $45 million guaranteed in the hole on a quarterback that can't play for you currently because of injury, and that nobody wants to play for you currently, even if he wasn't injured. You then also have to draft a quarterback this upcoming year in the draft in order to replace that guy. I, for one, this is the biggest shocker out of all of this is the fact that Myles Garrett was willing to sign up for it. I understand how hard it must be to turn down quite literally generational money for that position. I mean, Myles Garrett is literally making near high-end quarterback money. But it goes completely against the idea that he had himself put out on display in front of everybody. He himself had let everybody know he wanted out of Cleveland. And he made it seem like it had nothing to do with the financials. He made it all seem like it had everything to do with competing for a championship. That's not going to happen in Cleveland, but he's getting paid. So that's done and over with. Then you immediately switch gears to Trey Hendrickson, because the idea was, well, if the Bills can't get Myles Garrett, whether that be they're unable to trade for him, whether that be somebody else trades for him, or whether that be Cleveland keeps him, which is exactly what happened, the next logical thought was, what about Trey Hendrickson? And I think you just got your answer from what happened with Myles Garrett here. It's very likely, granted, Trey Hendrickson isn't as good as Myles Garrett, but he has numbers that are close enough to where I think there's going to be some team that does trade for Trey Hendrickson and gives him very similar type money, a very similar type contract. And when you sink in and you let the fantasy that is signing one of these guys dissipate, the reality hits home that you are paying one of these guys quarterback money at 29 years of age, going to be 30. It's not in the cards. And this is how you end up getting to Joey Bosa. And when you think about the Bills' need at the position, when you think about the current financial situation the Bills are in, and when you think about the inability to be able to go and get one of those guys because of that, Joey Bosa makes a hell of a lot of sense. And I think that's why you saw Brandon Beane do it when he did it. I don't think there's any coincidence that as soon as you see Myles Garrett sign that contract with the Cleveland Browns, I don't think there's any coincidence that as soon as you see that, basically within a calendar day, you see Brandon Beane go out there and get Joey Bosa. You also saw Brandon Beane release Von Miller. So the way I see this, could many people argue it as potentially a lateral move? Maybe. But what other move was there really to be made here? What other move, as it stands, was going to be in the cards for Brandon Beane? Because we saw the Arizona Cardinals sign Josh Sweat to a 4-year, $76 million deal. So that's roughly what? A little under $20 million a year. So you saw him off the board, right? Obviously, Myles Garrett off the board. And I do think Trey Hendrickson, whoever ends up trading for him, is going to command that type of money. That's all gone. Then what's the next solution? Either draft a guy, pay Von Miller again, who already was going to have a massive cap hit, or find an adequate solution for right now while hopefully potentially going into the draft and then maybe finding that long-term solution finally at some point. I think the signing of Joey Bosa shows you that the DN position is probably ticking up the list of priorities on Brandon Beane's wish list when it comes to this upcoming draft. But for a one-year deal at $12.6 million, when you factor in all of the other things at hand, I can't sit here and be upset with this. It's all going to be contingent on the health of Joey Bosa. That's basically what it's all going to come down to. The problem is that he's not been able to maintain that health for a while now. He hasn't played 16 games in a season since 2021. But when he is out on the field, he is a force. That's the key. So is it going to be a move like Von Miller where you bring him in and then use him in a limited role? Is he going to be that third down type role? And I would guess that that's probably more likely than not. But you do get him for cheaper than Von Miller. As it stands right now, what's the current age gap? So Von Miller, yeah, I mean, so this is basically what you're getting. You release Von Miller. And what's that? What did that save you on? That added about $8.5 million onto the cap. Von Miller's 35 years old. You then take that money for $12.3 million. You're adding a guy who's 6 years younger, who's going to be bringing you roughly the same role that Von Miller had been playing for you the last few years, right? I think it makes a whole lot of sense. Now, Kevin's asking, is this excuses for Beane? Now, here's what's interesting about this. When we're talking about Beane's angle on this. What else was Brandon Beane to do in this situation? What else was Brandon Beane to do in this current situation? Because you saw Myles Garrett get taken off the board. You know that Trey Hendrickson's next in line on that list of trade candidates at the position. And is it not inevitable that Trey Hendrickson's probably going to get a similar type deal? I would think so. You also have to factor into what we were talking about on Friday night. How willing would the Cincinnati Bengals be to work with the Buffalo Bills? I'm sure that the Cincinnati Bengals are getting calls left, right, and center from different teams out there who are throwing packages all over the place to try to get a guy like Trey Hendrickson. Led the league in sacks last year. So not only would the Bills have to come to the table with a hefty bag of draft capital or players, they'd probably also have to outdo the guy behind him simply due to the fact that the Bills and the Bengals are both currently trying to contend for the top of the AFC. Then they'd also probably have to pay him, if not $40 million a year, what? 37, 38 million? When you really think about it, would it have been great to have had Trey Hendrickson? Absolutely. But the idea of it happening, probably not that likely. And with Myles Garrett already gone, what was Brandon Beane to do? Wait until the draft? Or get the one guy available right now that you know, if healthy, can be a game changer for this defense? I mean, that's what a lot of things are contingent on too, is it not? Terrell Bernard's a perfect example. The Bills just extend Terrell Bernard. When healthy, Terrell Bernard's he's been terrific. Can he stay healthy? When Matt Milano's been on the field for the Bills, he's been terrific. Can he stay healthy? Unfortunately, that's the nature of this game. Can you stay healthy? Joey Bosa has been unable to stay healthy, but that's probably why you do get him for a 1 year, $12.6 million deal? Is Joey Bosa getting that deal, that type of team-friendly deal, if not for the injury history? I would imagine not. Brandon Beane's looking at this from the upside perspective because you lose Von Miller, and I think what you are replacing Von Miller with is a younger, cheaper version of him who's going to give you the same role, but for perhaps longer. and you only get it under a 1-year deal. The Bills are signing up here for a 1-year trial run. That's it. You know, you look back at the Von Miller signing for Buffalo, they locked that in long term, and look how it turned out. Say you go and get Joey Bosa, and it winds up being worse than the acquisition of Von Miller. It's 1 year and you're out, $12.6 million. You think about what the potential could be here, what the Bills are putting up to get it. I think the risk is worth the reward there. You guys let me know what you think in the chat. A 1-year deal for a guy that, when healthy, is phenomenal. Knowing you can get out of it after a year, knowing that you're essentially going to get a guy replacing what Von Miller was for you while saving money due to Von Miller if you were to keep him around executing the same role. Even if it is a linear move, the linear move is still more beneficial to Buffalo, in my opinion, than keeping Von Miller around. Richie's coming in. He's saying, Bot, it's a steal. Super Bowl 60, you already know, baby. If he stays healthy and utilized correctly, this could be a steal. Like Richie's saying, a steal. Can he stay healthy? Dan's coming in. I'm back, brother. Would have preferred Max or Garrett, but Bosa worth a 1-year trial. Locked up Allen, Bernard, Shakir. You think Cook feels slighted? We'll talk all about that tomorrow, by the way. By the way, if you're just tuning in tomorrow morning, probably do around 9 a.m. We're going to go for a few hours. I want to talk about everything. There's so much that happened. I couldn't hop on yesterday. I had a personal matter come up. Worst possible timing ever because of how much has gone down. We'll talk about everything that's happened with the Bills over the last 48 hours, as well as the rest of the league as well. Justin Fields, now the quarterback of the New York Jets. We'll talk about that. Devontae Adams going to the Steelers. But beyond all that, we will certainly be talking a ton about what the Bills have pulled off, including making Josh Allen a very, very rich man, and including getting Josh Allen, one of Joey Bosa's former partners in crime, to throw the ball to, which I am awfully excited about. Also adding another defensive player that should help things out as well. Tons to talk about tomorrow. So I'm looking at the chat here, and they're saying there is no risk to this move. Retro saying there's no risk to this move. The Dash is saying the risk is he's injury prone. Yeah, so I believe that there is a risk. Anytime you bring in a player who does have an injury history, anytime you bring in a player who's about to enter into his 10th season, of course there's risk. But you're talking about a 1-year lease at $12.6 million here. And you got to remember, too, when it comes to injury, yeah, Joey Bosa has an injury history. But what's to say, and I know the hindsight's 2020, but what happens if the Bills go all in? What happens if the Bills go all in and they paid that massive contract to Myles Garrett, or they paid that massive contract to Trey Hendrickson, and then they get injured? We're still talking about guys that are going to be 30 years old here, 30 plus years old. The risk with any of these situations is always, it's prominent. It happened with Von Miller. Do you think anybody was anticipating Von Miller getting signed to the Bills with the money that he was given, and then he was going to immediately have a season-ending injury? No, but the Bills, look how the Bills navigated that situation. The Bills were able to be one of the best teams in the league while still having Von Miller not come close to working out the way that they were hoping it would. I look at this situation for the money spent and for the possible upside. There's far more to gain here than there is to lose. At least that's how I see it. Plus, last year, 14 games played. 2 years, the 2 years prior, 5 games played and 9 games played. So last year, already back up to a near full season with 14 games played. The Bills need somebody to rely on in terms of their ability to impact the pass rush. And throughout Joey Bosa's career, he's had one of the better pass rush win rates that there is. But it's all contingent on health. That's what it is. The other thing, too, is when you think logically, this always felt like this was going to be more likely than the other options, right? The Myles Garrett option, the Trey Hendrickson option. Did this not always feel like the more likely option? It was going to be more affordable. There was going to be less years on the deal. You weren't going to have to give up any assets in order to give them. And I think really the main catalyst here was that Myles Garrett was no longer on the board. You couldn't even consider going in all in on him. And the thing that stuns me the most about the Myles Garrett contract situation, okay, maybe he stays with Cleveland. I would have thought they would have dragged this out until April at the latest. April. The fact that Myles Garrett this early into March signed that deal with Cleveland, I would have thought they would have taken this way further into the offseason. I thought Cleveland was going to see how much of a bag they could drive up from somebody else. And wouldn't you have thought, in turn, maybe Myles Garrett could have gotten even more money? I don't know. Was anybody expecting him to get $40 million? I'm shocked that they got this deal done as quickly as they did. I would have thought that this would have extended at least another couple of weeks, if not a month. And to think that we are now hitting the $40 million a year mark at the defensive end position. What the hell is Micah Parsons going to get now? I mean, Cowboys fans got to be crapping themselves. There's already been talks about the potential of them moving off of him already. What's Myles Garrett or what's Micah Parsons going to get now? I know Trey Hendrickson might not get $40 million, but you just saw within 1 week, you saw Nick Bosa go from being the highest paid defensive end at $34 million. The second closest to that was Joshua Hines Allen of the Jacksonville Jaguars. He was the second highest paid defensive end to Nick Bosa prior to Max Crosby's signing. And that was at $28.2 million. So Nick Bosa was the only defensive end in the league making above $30 million. And it was pretty substantial above $30 million, $34 million. Within 1 week, you saw that go to 35.5 for Max Crosby and 40 for Myles Garrett. And I think as soon as you saw that, you probably had to be of the knowledge that the Bills were not going to be able to do business with either the Browns, which seems like they weren't going to be doing business with anybody, or the Bengals. And the one thing I keep coming back to with the Bengals, the idea of Trey Hendrickson still being out there and that looming possibility of, hey, screw the salary cap, who cares? I'd still pay Trey Hendrickson, $38 million. I get all that. The one thing I think that we haven't probably considered enough, and it kept weighing on my mind, is the idea of the Bengals working with the Bills. That, to me, was the toughest part of that situation. Now, if Trey Hendrickson played for the Carolina Panthers, New Orleans Saints, whatever, okay, maybe you could hold out further hope, right? You could hold out hope. And there's no reason why they wouldn't work with Buffalo. But why would the Bengals, who are just a year removed from this past season of being right there with the Bills competing for the top of the AFC, why would they trade their best defensive player to Buffalo with the knowledge that that is the missing piece that Buffalo currently possesses, that if they get it, they are right there? Now, Big Papa's saying Hendrickson isn't getting that much money, Z-Bot. Come on now. Well, let's think about it. Listen, I'm with you. I'm with you on the idea of wanting to think rationally about these contracts, but I think we got to stop thinking rationally about it. Because, right now you have the Jaguars' Josh Allen making 28.2. You have Brian Burns making 28.2. You have TJ Watt making 28. Do you think that whoever was dealing for Trey Hendrickson was not going to be paying him 30 mil plus? I highly doubt it, especially in the midst of a massive resurgence at the financial circumstances surrounding the position. There is no way that Trey Hendrickson is not going to get a deal closer to the $35 million range than the $28 million range. Worth it? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. But Max Crosby just got 35.5. Nick Bosa just got 34. And Trey Hendrickson just led the league last year in sacks. Do you think his agent's sitting there coming off a year where he just led the league in sacks, knowing that Cincinnati's looking to move off of him because they don't want to pay him? You really think he's going to be taking a discount that's in the 20s? I don't think so. Just ask yourself this. What's more likely? Trey Hendrickson makes $34 million or $28 million? Because he's already making $21 million, and he's coming off of a year where he led the league in sacks. I'm not saying he's going to hit 40. It's kind of like the Saquon situation. Just because Saquon Barkley is making $20 million doesn't mean James Cook's making $20 million. I'm not saying that. But Saquon's making 20. James Cook wants 15. Myles Garrett's making 40. I bet you Trey Hendrickson wants 35. Myles Garrett just got 35.5. I'd be stunned beyond repair if we find out once Trey Hendrickson's moved that his contract is not above $32 million. And I think that probably factored into Brandon Beane's idea here. It's not even going to be worth the time trying to work with Cincinnati because, one, why would they want to work with us? Two, even if they're willing to work with us, how much are we going to have to give up? And then on top of what we give up, how much are we going to have to pay this guy? And this is where Joey Bosa checks all of the other boxes, the opposite of those boxes. Cheap, short term, fills a void. Really, the risk-reward comparison, I think, outweighs the risk. And if it goes well, you have the opportunity to keep him around for the long haul. I think right now the people that are upset are more upset at the idea that the Bills wound up not getting the home run guy, Hendrickson or Myles Garrett. But as we know right now, Myles Garrett was never an option. Nobody got him. Nobody got him. Still stunning me, by the way. Stunning me. If I had to bet on it, I would have bet at the very minimum he goes somewhere else. And if I did, and if you told me, okay, he's going to sign with Cleveland, I would have thought it would have been far later in the offseason. But he wasn't even an option. And then, the Trey Hendrickson situation, the more you think, I want you to think about it, become a Bengals fan for a second. Like we talked about Friday night, Rico and I. Instead of the Buffalo Fanatics, this is the Bengals Fanatics. Okay. How would you feel if we allowed Trey Hendrickson to seek a trade and the team vying for him the most was Baltimore or Kansas City or Cincinnati? Would there really be enough on the table for you that would satisfy making a move with that team? Not for me. You guys know how I felt about making that move with Xavier, with the Browns over Xavier Worthy. And now as it stands right now, and that's might not have been the best take in the world as it sits right now. Might be a take that I'm not all that upset that I was wrong on. For now. We'll see. But think about it. Is that a move you'd be willing to make regardless of the trade package on the table, sending your best edge rusher, immediately elevating that defense, whichever one of those teams it may be? I don't know. I'd have to think it how tough it was for me to sleep after the idea of the Bills making a late first-round trade with the Chiefs. The idea of how unsettling that was for me, I can't imagine how I'd feel if the Bills had a player the caliber of Trey Hendrickson and they moved him to the Ravens, the Bengals, the Chiefs. Couldn't even imagine. Now, there was a part of me that was like, well, Cincinnati seems to care far less about logistics, it seems like, with these teams than others. They just, I don't understand what goes on over there. They don't pay their top guys when they're due for contracts. They continuously are finicky with the money that they're giving to their top guys, constantly waiting, constantly toying around. I was thinking that maybe there was some glimmer of hope that the Bengals were so desperate to get Trey Hendrickson's what will be massive yearly contract off their books that they would maybe work with Buffalo. I don't know. But let's be honest. What was the odds of that happening? Not very high. So then this bears the question, what were the Bills to do? And this retro right here. What else were they realistically going to get for edge help this offseason? Be honest. This is what it all comes down to. I understand. I'm as upset as all you guys. I just spent the last month of my life. I can't tell you how the amount of streams, the amount of short edited videos I made, the amount of conversations I had with people at the bar and my dad and whoever else. I can't tell you the amount of time I have spent the last month talking about the idea of Myles Garrett becoming a Bill. So trust me when I say that no one's more upset than me that it wound up not even being a possibility. But when that becomes reality, when the idea that wasn't even a possibility becomes a reality, the question then becomes, what's the next solution? And I don't know if getting Joey Bosa, I don't know if it gets any better than getting Joey Bosa when it comes to answering that question, when it comes to finding that solution. I want to see in the chat right now. For those, you guys let me know, real. I just want to see it all at once. See it come in. On a scale of 1 to 10, how happy are you with the signing? And give me a short reasoning as to why. And for those who are really unhappy with it, give me a little bit more of a detailed reason as to why you're not. I'm very interested to see why those who do not like this are out on it. Just looking something up here real quick. And I'm seeing, all right, hold on, an injury, believe me, 100% aware of the injury situation. I want you to factor in, let's play fantasy land here. Let's just say 1-year deal, and we've been gifted, we have a crystal ball, and we were able to look into it. We don't know anything else other than we got a fully healthy year. Factor that in. I understand the injury history 100%. Let's just say for this hypothetical, we're guaranteed one fully healthy year. What's that number to you, 1 out of 10? Because I think everybody's biggest concern is the health. Everybody's. Let's just factor in, let's say we get a healthy year. Because you got to remember, he was more healthy last year than he was the 2 years prior. All right, let's take a peek. So John's kicking us off. He's saying, for the money, a 10. He's saying for the money we got him, he's giving it a 10 out of 10. Nichols said he's saying 10. We have a bookend for Groot now. We'll talk more about Groot, of course, tomorrow during the show. Like I mentioned, I keep mentioning it for those who are just joining. We'll have a long-term show tomorrow talking about everything the Bills have done the last 48 hours. Had a personal matter I had to address yesterday that took me away all day. So tomorrow I want to dedicate a full episode to talking about every single little thing the Bills have taken care of the last couple of days, including extending Greg Rousseau. 10 coming in from Nickel City. Hercules is saying 6. I'm not unhappy, just wasn't my first choice. And I think that's a fair way to look at this. Michelle's coming in saying 6 out of 7 because of the injury history. And that's fair. I want to look at this based on the idea that he's going to be healthy, because I think this is the only way you can look at it. But no matter if you sign Tom Brady in his prime, or you sign, if you're the Colts and you sign, what's his face, Daniel Jones. No matter who you sign, the best of the best, or the guy that is just looking for a backup role, injury history or injury risk is always going to be on the table. Whether you draft the guy, you trade for the guy, you sign the guy in free agency, all of these moves are made with the idea in mind that you are going to get a healthy player. Every single time you bring a player into the building, health is, of course, a risk. So we have to weigh this based on the idea that we're going to get a healthy year. John's coming in, he's saying 4, age. Okay, you're saying age, I get that. So I'm assuming then, John, then you would have been out. You would have been out on Myles Garrett, or you would have been out on Trey Hendrickson, because they're right there. They're right up there at that same age. I'd say the benefit here, if we're talking about age being a concern, is you're only doing this on a 1-year deal. If you were to get Trey Hendrickson or Myles Garrett, that would have been a long-term deal at the same age. So at least if age is a concern here, if it winds up showing itself substantially this upcoming year, you could easily move on. Bill he's coming in. He's saying the injuries as well. Cam's giving us a 9. Andy's saying his only concern is injury. And this is my main concern as well. It's injury. But when I factor in the concern for injury based on the year that the contract is in length and the money for the year, this is what makes me feel a bit more easy about the injury history. Leo's coming in, B+, because he's a good player when healthy and he can help the other guys. Red Bison saying he's washed. He's only giving it a 4. Ryan's coming in, he's saying 8. He still has fuel in the tank. We got any Nick saying 8. Like you said, the reward outweighs the risk with how much we are paying him. Jay Song is giving it a 7 if the injuries don't mess it up. Kevin's giving it a 4. B Buddha's giving it a 7. Huck Music 808, stoked and worried at the same time because of injury, so he's giving it a 7. And I think that's probably the fairest way to look at this. It's probably the fairest way to look at this. You're excited but concerned. But I think when you're looking at a 1-year deal for 12.6, it helps ease the concern. Would you guys agree? Yes, you're concerned about the possibility of him getting hurt. But I don't think he's going to be an every down player. I think he's going to rotate similar to the way that Von did. And in speaking of Von, what would you have rather have had? The Bills reunite with Von this upcoming year at 35 with injury history of his own and at a higher price tag? Casey coming in, 10 out of 10. Second best second best off the rank, but only upside in my opinion. Richie's saying 9.5, win-win, because even Bosa at 60% is going to draw attention. Steal. Mike's giving it an 8 with a B+. Bills fans giving it a 10, buy low, sell high. I mean, if we were in here right now talking about this same deal and we looked down and we saw that Joey Bosa got 18 million, maybe we're talking about, maybe we're having a different conversation here. We're talking 1 year at 29 years old for 12.6. And it didn't involve a trade either. No trade. 1 year, 1.6. Cameron's giving it an 8. Huck Music 808's giving it a 10. Johnny's giving it a 6. So it seems like everybody is high on this, with the health being a factor, right? We got 9 from Ryan saying healthy. Mark saying 9. Shu saying 9. Only MP7 saying even healthy, he's washed. See, I don't know. We don't know that. And define washed, by the way, because if we're talking about washed in compared to Myles Garrett and maybe Trey Hendrickson, then yeah, maybe. But there's a reason why we're not paying $40 million a year here. 12.6 million. If that's your idea of washed, then it's arguable. But there's a reason why 12.6 million is 12.6 million for Joey Bosa. And there's a reason why 40 million is 40 million for Myles Garrett at the same exact position. 1 second. I got to send a text message. I mean, I get that idea, right? The wash. The thing of it is, think about the Bills' financial situation. Think about what was out there that wasn't obtainable, and think about what they got for the price. I would understand the sentiment of washed if we're talking about this multi-year, $20 million a year deal. Then maybe we could start talking about that, right? Dominic saying, unhappy bot. We are going to rely on him to that guy rushing the passer this year. When he gets hurt, we're stuck with Greg and AJ. Not good enough. Let me ask you this then. Should they have done nothing? Should they have not have taken a risk at all? Because Myles Garrett's gone. Was never a possibility. Myles Garrett's off the table. And I really sincerely think Trey Hendrickson was not going to be on the table either. So I understand why you're unhappy based on the idea that injury could be on the horizon based on his history. But what were they to do? Not do anything? Or draft a guy that immediately becomes their Myles Garrett? That immediately becomes their Trey Hendrickson, Micah Parsons? They had to do something. What was better available than this with all the factors involved? The price, the term, the availability. Mina's saying 7. Beast if he stays healthy. And like Mike's saying, this is what I'm trying to get at. Injury is a risk with any player. 100%. And I would say, if we're looking at it from our perspective, from the Bills' perspective, how lucky we've been on the offensive side of the ball, especially with the way Josh Allen plays. I mean, we've been very lucky health-wise. Defensively, not so much. But once again, I argue, what else were you to do here? Are you simply not supposed to take the risk because of potential injury on the horizon and just go in with what you're already going in with? Because like what Dominic was saying here, if he does get injured and we're stuck with Greg and Epinesa, it's not good enough. If you don't take him in at all, you're stuck with Greg and Epinesa. So you're already starting off with it not good enough. You got to take a swing. And the home run swing, it wasn't going to be in the cards. It wasn't going to be in the cards. Josh is coming in. Z-Bot, I love the signing. Bosa played 80% plus each year with the Chargers. With how the Bills play DNs, he will play 50 to 60% of the snaps. Great deal for Brandon Beane. Let's take a peek here. Let's take a peek at last season in terms of snap count. So Von Miller played 279 snaps last year. 25% of the defensive snaps. 279 snaps last year for Von Miller. We compare that to Bosa. So here's just to give you an example. Joey Bosa, based on snap count, played twice the amount, basically played double the season Von Miller did last year. Double the season. And you got to remember, too, last year, Joey Bosa only played in 14 games. So in 2024, Joey Bosa played in 14 games. And he had nearly 500 snaps. Von Miller played in only one game less. He played in 13 games. So Von Miller in 13 games in 2024. Okay. Von Miller, 13 games in 2024, played 279 snaps. Joey Bosa in 14 games in 2024, played 456 snaps, nearly a 20% increase between the two. As I have, what is this? I have seen, so I believe, nearly 50% of the snap count last year, Joey Bosa played, just under it, 47%. So I think you're removing the cap hit. Are you removing the substantial difference in cap hit between Bosa and Von Miller? You're removing about a 6-year age gap. And based on just last season as a sample size, you might be getting double the amount of snap count. And if you're not planning on utilizing him the way that the Chargers utilized him last year, that only further increases his ability to stay healthy. Say instead of playing that 450-ish snap count that he played with the Chargers, say he plays 350, which would still be 100 more than Von Miller. He'd still be getting 100 less snaps. So I think there's a variety of reasons here why this makes a lot of sense. You're freeing up cap money. It's a 1-year deal. He's younger, and when healthy, is able to contribute a significant amount more to the snap count than Von Miller. And Mike's making another point here, too. If you bring in a guy that is going to command a double team, the rest of the defense benefits. The Bills need a guy that the offense has to focus in on. It's kind of like the Amari Cooper to the Bills offense. Amari Cooper's statistics weren't anything crazy once the Bills brought him in, but didn't it feel like things opened up for everybody else? Even though Amari Cooper wasn't lighting up the stat sheet, it did feel like everything started to open up, and that's why I thought that acquisition was beneficial for Buffalo. Just bringing in Joey Bosa, what does that do for Groot? What does that do for Epinesa? What does that do for Ed Oliver? I think you needed a guy like Bosa that commands that respect. And then you maybe go into the draft and you draft another one to be on the back end, waiting in the wings. Wouldn't shock me. First round pick and 2 second-round picks. The Bills end up keeping all 3 of them. I would imagine at least one of them goes towards the defensive line. Those fans saying that Bosa plays run defense. This is a good point. Bosa plays run defense. Von didn't play a single run snap down on the entire season. I see Bosa playing more snaps than Von, and he stops the run. Well, wasn't one of our bigger concerns last year for the Bills D the ability to stop the run? So maybe you're getting an even bigger upside with Joey Bosa here. Maybe you're getting even more of an upside in those situations. Brings in a better opportunity to stop the run. It felt like one of the bigger weaknesses for the Bills defense last year was stopping the run at times. I think for the money, for the term, for the swap of him to Von Miller, and when you factor in the idea that Myles Garrett wasn't going to be on the table and Trey Hendrickson likely wasn't going to be either, I think for all those reasons, this makes a lot of sense. And for $12.6 million on a 1-year deal for a guy that you know can be a stud when healthy, I think it's a hell of a chance taken by Beane with, I think, far more upside on the risk reward meter. It's 1 year. It's 1 year, and let's hope it's a good year. But this idea that the Bills can find out, too, within a 1-year time span, this idea that it can be 1 year and they're not married to this long-term situation on top of it, too, with the financials not being very stringent on the Bills cap, there's a lot of things to like about it. We'll think about it more overnight. We'll sleep on it. We'll talk about it some more for sure tomorrow. Like I said, tomorrow morning, monitor your phones. You'll get a notification. I'm going to schedule a stream early in the morning, probably around 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll talk more about Joey Bosa going to the Bills. We will also talk about all of the other news coming out of One Bills Drive, including multiple extensions, a few additions as well. Plenty to touch on. We'll talk about it all tomorrow. We'll sit back here for a couple of hours and we'll dive into all of the things that Brandon Beane and the Bills have taken care of over the next couple of days. And maybe perhaps while we're live, some more things will come to fruition and we'll see what could be in store as tomorrow the official free agency period starts and a lot of these pre-tampered deals get locked in tomorrow afternoon. But in the meantime, make sure to be on the lookout tomorrow morning around 9 a.m. Eastern. We'll dive into more Joey Bosa to the Bills and plenty of other topics surrounding Buffalo. Brandon Beane has been busy the last couple of days here, retaining guys, paying guys, and bringing new faces in. So a lot to talk about, and I look forward to talking about it with you tomorrow morning. So keep an eye out tomorrow early morning around 9 a.m. Eastern, and we'll rock for however long it ends up taking. But for in the meantime, little after 12 a.m., and I appreciate well over 2,000 of you hopping on with me. I know many of you spent time with Rico transitioning into me. It's the beauty of this time of year, man. News after news after news, and we're on it like white on rice. We'll be back on it again tomorrow to talk even more about all the going-ons at One Bills Drive. But in the meantime, it's after midnight. So get some sleep this evening. We'll tune in tomorrow on a Wednesday and get right back after it. On your way out the door, like button if you could, subscribe button if you could, and make sure to be on the lookout for tomorrow morning stream where we'll dive into so much more surrounding what the Bills have been up to here in the early free agency period. But for tonight, that's going to do it. Get some sleep. Much love as always. Thank you all, as always, for tuning in. Talk tomorrow morning, and go Bills.